Yip yip! Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and this is a buildable LEGO Avatar The Last Airbender Appa. This is such an adorable model, and I knew from the moment I saw this at Brickworld Chicago, I had to build it myself. Now, the instructions and parts list to find this online can actually be found in the description below. So if you want to build this yourself, you can go ahead and check it out. But now, let's dive into my review of this custom LEGO Avatar The Last Airbender Appa the Sky Bison. Let's go right now. So here's the buildable Appa the Sky Bison from Avatar The Last Airbender. This is a mock by AxiDroid, who initially posted it on Rebrickable, and now you can actually purchase the instructions directly from Brickvault, and I've linked those in the description below. This is, in my opinion, the best and most detailed version of Appa the Sky Bison that pretty much exists out there in the world. And that's not to put down any other versions, I just came across this one and was just so incredibly impressed by the amount of detail, how cute it was, and how accurate it was, especially when scaled to minifigures and posing up with characters from the show. Now, I have always wanted LEGO to do Avatar The Last Airbender right. Yes, obviously we did get some official LEGO sets based on the TV show back in the day, but to be completely honest, those are definitely products of their time, and we never actually got an official LEGO Appa build, so it's really cool to actually get something like this. Now, I want to dive deep into what you can actually do with the model and how you can pose it up, but first I want to talk a little bit about the building techniques. As you can see, this is a very organically shaped model, and one thing that really drew me to it when I first saw it at a LEGO convention, I think it was on display at Brickworld Chicago, was just the sheer detail in the shaping and the amount of detail put into making the fur seem realistic. It is just absolutely incredible, and I was totally blown away by the amount of detail factored in here. Obviously, as you can see, you have all sorts of studs on these side techniques, but you also have angled studs. You have the shaggy fur going over the eyes, you have the ability to open and close the mouth, and you even have the layers of fur on the top of the body, everything just working together in tandem to make this a really accurate representation of how the creature appeared in the show. Now, the instructions do have the option to build a very simple stand for it, but since I'm going to be hanging this one from my ceiling, I chose not to and just wanted to build the actual thing. Now, obviously, as you can see, you have all of the iconic details of Appa from the show, and I think my favorite detail is the arrow on the forehead. The way it's depicted utilizing the triangular shaped LEGO tiles is actually really well done. I'm really impressed by the amount of detail they were able to factor into the arrow, having it feel organic, like it's painted on, not feeling like it's kind of like a separate notch or a separate build, and obviously it's not using any stickers or decals. It's pretty much just fully brick built, making it even more impressive. That amount of detail continues onto the back of the tail. While the tail itself is admittedly not very posable, I'm used to seeing it in the show just flapping up and down, flopping all over the place. Obviously, they kind of decided to go for style over function when it came to this particular tail, and I think that actually totally makes sense. You have the tail that feels very kind of furry, it feels very much like one solid piece, and yes, you can wiggle it a little bit as I'm about to demonstrate, but it pretty much is mostly fixed at one angle, and that's for good reason. Because of the way that it's angled, you really do have all of these individual pieces working together. Frankly, if there was more articulation factored into the tail, it probably wouldn't look as good, or at least as solid, because gaps would have had to be made. Now, speaking of the legs, you can actually rotate each of the legs back and forth just ever so slightly. They're actually mounted on ball joints, so they actually have quite a lot of friction when you rotate them back and forth. And yes, you can even splay out the toes and wiggle each and every one of the individual toes, which is a very cute touch and one of my favorite features of the entire model. Now, moving onwards to the top of it, I actually really like how the saddle is done as well. It's a very simple build, just kind of a wood style of saddle or a leather saddle with some studs mounted on the sides as well as the angled elements, but it just looks really accurate to the show. And the saddle is removable, meaning that you can modify it to just be Appa by himself. The only downside when putting this together, to be completely honest, was the way that the mouth attached. It was a little bit difficult to get that all attached while I was building it, but once it was on, that was not coming off. And unless you're really rough with it, this is a really sturdy model. One thing that really impressed me about this model is it isn't just a really nicely done, incredible mock that is a work of art. Sometimes there are a lot of mocks that look really good, but honestly are not the most solid. But that's not the case with this. As I mentioned, you're gonna have to be really rough for pieces to even start to break off. And for the most part, it's incredibly sturdy as a build. Even the instructions themselves felt like I was building an official LEGO set, which honestly is the highest praise that I can probably give for any set of instructions for really anything, because when you're making instructions, that is almost as hard as making a mock itself. And I would know because I have tried to make instructions for stuff I've made, and it is really, really difficult to try to figure out, well, what's the order of pieces to place that makes the most sense. But while I was building this, it literally just felt like building a legitimate LEGO set. And there are very few mock instructions that really feel like it. A lot of the times you have to kind of piece it together and maybe sometimes even open up like a digital file to understand how everything's going on, but this was incredibly professionally done, and I was really impressed by just how good it looked overall because of the way that it was all put together. Now, overall, I'm definitely biased towards The Last Airbender. I hope that LEGO will consider making more sets, especially given the fact that I feel like popularity of The Last Airbender is at an all-time high because of the Netflix show, the live-action show, as well as a lot of people rewatching the cartoon. I would love for LEGO to put out like an 18+ icons version of this build, but this is basically it. And honestly, I don't know how LEGO could possibly beat a build like this. It's incredibly detailed. It's posable in all the ways that matter, and that means opening the mouth to reveal the tongue, having the legs be pushed backwards as he's flying through the air, and even having a little bit of tail motion back and forth and up and down, as I was able to showcase on video here, just to show the amount of articulation. It's just super cool, and it's not the most playable thing. It definitely is more of a display model, but I'm really happy with how everything looks, and it definitely is one of the best mocks I have made in a while. Of course, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this build as well. Do you think LEGO should make more Avatar: The Last Airbender sets? Should they try it again after the very, very weak start that they did all the way back in like 2007 with some pretty questionable minifigures and some pretty poor builds? Obviously, LEGO building and techniques have gone a long way, and well, just take a look at this as an example. This is a really phenomenally well done build, and I'm really happy with how this was put together. Just to kind of wrap up my closing thoughts on this build, the instructions right now on BrickVault are $30, which honestly I feel is pretty fair given just how good of a build it is and how detailed it is. I'm just really impressed by everything, and it does have 2,441 pieces, 40 centimeters in length, 14 centimeters in width, and 30 centimeters in height. Now, one thing I will say is that ordering all of the pieces from Bricklink cost me around $400. However, I will fully admit I was not optimizing for price, I was optimizing for speed. If you don't know, I recently moved to New York, and long story short, I had to get all of these pieces in before my move. So I basically just figured out what store has most of the pieces all at once and just bought them all from one store. But if you were to try it, I feel like you'd probably settle at around the $200 to $250 range if you wanted to actually try to price optimize, unlike me, because there definitely are ways to cut down on price when ordering from Bricklink. One other thing I do want to note that I actually really appreciated about this model, which admittedly did sometimes make it a little bit harder during the building process, but certainly will help others when it comes to the price, there's a number of pieces in this model where it literally doesn't matter what color they are, and you can basically make them any color you want. That means that, let's say for example, if you need to buy a certain piece that is a lot more expensive in white or gray as compared to red, well, you can just buy it in whatever color that you need, and then later on, you can just put it in the model and it'll never be seen. That's something I honestly haven't seen that much when it comes to making a ton of other LEGO custom builds and having instructions be made for LEGO builds. And while there are pros and cons, because sometimes some of the pieces I ordered in random colors were in white, so I did have to check if I was in fact supposed to be using the white piece or if maybe there was a different piece I should have been using and then using the white piece on the outside. But for the most part, since you can see what the outside of the model looks like, you're probably pretty safe with getting really any color and just kind of figuring it out during the build. Just one thing I want to point out that absolutely is something I'm appreciative of, because that will help people use bricks in their their own collection as well and really try to cut down on the price when recreating this model. Overall, after all is said and done, this is a really solidly built model. It's heavy, it's got a ton of pieces, it's really nicely detailed, and it is, in my opinion, the best version of a buildable LEGO Appa that currently exists out there. Now, how much do I think this is worth? Honestly, probably around $250. I think the instructions being $30 makes total sense. I totally support it when mock creators sell their instructions online. I am 1000% behind that because I think that's super cool of them to do. But overall, did I overpay for my own pieces? Yeah, probably, but that's also my own fault. I think this is a really, really well done model. It is incredibly detailed, and if you want to check it out, I have linked a link to get it down in the description below. I just hope the creator of this model sees this video because a friend of that creator kind of asked me to do this, and I was gonna do it anyway without even asking, so that was totally all good. But we kind of were doing this as a little bit of a surprise, so we told the original mockist, like, oh, I'm not interested, I'm not gonna make a video on it. And then this video is gonna be a nice surprise for them when it comes out. So I'm really excited. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you so much for creating such an amazing mock, may I add. And thank you all so much to the viewers for watching this and commenting. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Goodbye for now.